Hi everyone, it's Kate with Maritime Ceramics. Welcome back. Today we are going to have a look at one of Coyote's new fantasy glazes called Stardust. We're going to have a look at it today on a variety of different clays. We'll test it out with a bit of layering and see how it performs and hopefully give you an idea of whether or not it's something you want to add to your studio. Unusually large amount of testers for this glaze. I'm not really sure why. If you watched my Basilisk Hide review, you've already had a sneak peek of Stardust because I did layer this with Basilisk Hide in that video. So go have a look at that after this one is done. I'm going to do some different layering options this time around. Coyote are notorious for having glazes that hard pan and do some kind of awful things when they're in the jar. So I was really pleasantly surprised to see when I opened this that actually it was pretty normal. A little chunky on the bottom, needed some mixing up, but then it was good to go. So good job on that one, Coyote. Hopefully this means that they've kind of got that figured out and they've added some, I don't know, bentonite or something to their glazes to stop that from happening. If you want to see an example of how it can go wrong, go have a look at the Firefly Garden video. That was an experience. I don't use a lot of white glaze in my studio. I've only ever used two, I think. So Emiko Snow, which is a super flat white Celadon that does not move at all, and Pearl White, which is the exact opposite. It is a very fluid glaze. It runs a ton. It does some fun stuff in combinations. The reason I love Pearl White so much is because it does truly spectacular things on red clay. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm curious to know how Coyote's Stardust compares to Spectrum's Pearl White. So I'm going to give it a try on this plate, which is made from Pottery Supply House 500 clay. It's a red clay, obviously. And I'm going to do 3 coats on the plate, but I'm only going to do 3 coats on the inside because I do not know if this is a runner yet. And the reason I'm doing 3 coats instead of 2 on this is because of the texture in the bottom of this plate. You can see kind of the spiral that I carved into it when I was trimming it on the wheel. It's a really shallow texture, so it could be really easily filled in. So 3 coats of Stardust on this texture is going to give me a really good idea of how much it fills in texture because it's on a flat surface, so there's nowhere for it to run off to, and it's a delicate texture. So we'll see how this turns out when it comes out of the kiln. I have high expectations. Of course, we want to do a white testile too. This little ring dish, it's Reclaim, would be a mixture of Pottery Supply House's 519 and 910 clays, so that's their white stoneware and porcelain, both cone 6 clays. On this dish, again, just looking to see what Stardust looks like on its own. One of the things I love about doing testiles with 2 coats is how quickly they're done, especially with Coyote glazes, because the way it's formulated, it doesn't take as long to dry as the Emiko or Mako glazes, or even some of the Spectrum ones. The downside is that you don't have time to kind of smooth it out when you're brushing because it dries so fast. But in this case, I don't think it's going to matter because this looks like a fairly fluid, melty glaze with lots of float, so it should be pretty forgiving. On this white testile, again, probably Reclaim, but definitely a white clay. We are going to pour Stardust inside. I want to know how it performs when it is poured. It is the inside of the dish, so if it's too thick, then at least it has nowhere to run. And this will give us an idea if pouring works or not, because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just gets too thick on the inside of the pot. Now, I will say that although pouring is faster, you do spend a lot of time holding your pot upside down, waiting for it to drip out. Again, with Coyote's formulation, having a little bit less of those extenders in it, it dries much faster than some of the other glazes. Some glazes you can be sitting there for a while waiting for it to drip out. I'm going to do 2 coats of Stardust on the outside, and then I'm going to do 2 coats of Spectrum's Bougainvillea on top of the inside portion. The reason I'm doing it on the inside is because for sure that combo is going to run. I would be awfully surprised if it didn't. And I'll do 2 coats of the Bougainvillea because 2 coats of most Spectrum glazes is enough, especially if you're layering them. 3 coats would be a lot of glaze. So we'll just do the 2 coats and we'll do it on the inside. Public service announcement. Please make sure that you wipe your jars before putting the lids back on. As you can see by the condition of this particular jar, I do not always follow my own advice. So learn from my mistakes and clean off the top of your jar before you put the lid on. One of my favorite layering glazes is Amico's Seaweed, so we definitely want to give this one a try. On this test tile, I'm going to do things the other way around. I'm going to put the seaweed on first, and then I'll put the Stardust over top of that. And it is important to know the order of the layering because you can get very different results when you flip the order of the layering around. So the results that I get from this one with the seaweed on first and then the Stardust over top will not necessarily be the same as I would get with Stardust underneath and seaweed on the top. And there's only so much testing I can do, so you kind of have to pick one. But just an important thing for you to know if you're watching these videos and then recreating some of these combos at home, just make sure that you're doing them in the same order, or if you're not doing them in the same order, that you're aware of that and you're doing it because you want to try it and see how it looks. On this one, I'm going to brush the inside, so I'll do 2 coats of the seaweed and then 2 coats of the Stardust. And ordinarily I would pour the inside of a spoon rest like this because life is short, but when you're layering, you really don't want to get too much glaze, and sometimes the pouring does end up with too much glaze. So we will brush it, 2 coats of each, and see how that turns out. I have used seaweed with pearl white before. It did not end well. One of these days I'm going to do a review of Spectrum's pearl white, and I'm saving a dish to show you there. But we're going to give it a try here with the Stardust and see how that performs. Seaweed on its own is not a runner. Seaweed in combination with other things runs like a toddler with chocolate. So we are only doing the layering combo on the inside of this spoon rest. The outside, I'm just going to do seaweed because life is too short to clean that many kiln shelves. On this little succulent planter, I want to combine a couple of Coyote glazes. We'll do the Stardust and combine it with Coyote's Frosted Topaz. Really curious to see how these two do with each other. If memory serves, Frosted Topaz is part of the Archie's line, so sometimes you get some really interesting results from that line of glazes. And I feel like white and this light turquoise color could do some really pretty things together. I'm doing 2 coats of Stardust and then 2 coats of Frosted Topaz. Again, I don't want to get too much glaze on this pot. And I'm also only going to do the Frosted Topaz on the top part of the pot. Again, this is because of running. So anytime I'm layering 2 glazes together for the first time, I try to approach with caution. Because there's nothing more frustrating than losing a pot to a runny glaze when you really and truly should have known better, right? So I'm just going to put it on the top section here, and that'll give us a chance to see what it does when it combines and if it runs. We saw in the Basilisk Hide video last week that sometimes the layering can cause some really wonky things to happen with glazes, and so I want to give it some runway to kind of do the wonkiness without destroying my kiln shelves. This little ring dish was made with the nuCeramics Bayside Buff Clay, and this is a cone 6 clay made right here in Fredericton It fires to kind of a tan color, I would call it, and often gets a really lovely toasty edge on it where the glaze stops. You'll see what I mean once it's fired. And this little Bayside Buff ring dish will be another kind of control tile for us. So we will have it on the red clay, we will have it on the white clay, and we will have it on the Bayside Buff clay on its own so we can see what Stardust does on each one of those different clays. It's a really important part for me with testing a new glaze. You want to know what it does on its own on all the clays that you're using, and then, you know, the layering is kind of bonus, quite honestly. When I'm looking for new glazes, myself, I'm looking for a glaze that looks good on its own. And if you can layer it with other glazes, that's a bonus. But I don't know, I feel like we spend so much money on the glazes. If you have to layer them to get them to do something interesting, it just feels like a waste of time and money to me. Which is not to say that layering glazes is a waste of time and money, but that having to layer the glaze to get it to be interesting, it's just not what I'm looking for. I really want something that's interesting and varied on its own, and then I can start to have some fun with combining it with other glazes. As always, let's review what's going into the kiln before we fire it. On this little ring dish, I did 2 coats on the inside and 2 coats on the outside, just Stardust alone. On this dish, I poured Stardust on the inside, did 2 coats on the outside, and then on the inside, I layered 2 coats of Spectrum's Bougainvillea on top of the Stardust. On the spoon rest, I did 3 coats of seaweed on the outside and 2 coats of seaweed on the inside, and then 2 coats of Stardust on top of the seaweed, only on the inside, and then around the rim as well. On this little everything dish on the nuCeramics Bayside Buff Clay, I did 2 coats of Stardust, and I only did them on the inside. Last but definitely not least is our plate made with Pottery Supply House 500 red clay. And this one has 3 coats of Stardust. I will go back and tidy up all of the edges before I put these in the kiln, wipe it off so it has a nice clean edge. All right, let's pop these into the kiln for a cone 6 firing. While I do that, now is a great time for you to hit the like button if you're enjoying this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that, and hit the hype button if you care to. All of that stuff is much appreciated and helps the channel to grow, which helps me to keep bringing glaze reviews to you guys. Okay, everyone, we have our Stardust testers out of the kiln. I actually did a couple more off screen as well, and I have an unusually large amount of testers for this glaze. I'm not really sure why that happened, but it's okay. More is better than less, right? So let's dive in and have a look. I have all of my Post-it notes that I have managed to keep this time around. I'm doing much better with that so that I can actually give you accurate information here. So let's have a look at the testers that I did that were just the Stardust first. You're going to notice a lot of color variation here. I do my best with the color grading on these videos, but it's an art as much as a science, and one that I honestly don't know much about. So I am going to describe the colors here in case they don't show up properly on your screen. This plate, the Stardust behaved really nicely. It's a nice, beautiful, clean edge. Sorry, it's wet. I've been sanding things and water kind of gets everywhere. This is, I would call it a peach tone in the float here. Not pink, definitely a peach. So it's a very warm tone to the float. And this was in a slow cool kiln. In fact, all of the ones that you're going to see that I glazed on screen, they all went into a slow cool. And then I have a couple that I did off screen that went into a regular cool. And that result was really interesting. So stay tuned. The plate was 3 coats of Stardust. I quite like this effect where it's pulled away from the edge and you get that kind of toasty red clay popping through. I think that's really pretty. And the back we left unglazed. This is also red test tile, but this was Reclaim. This mark is just from the kiln post that I had kind of set it on in the kiln. So this is a lighter red. Possibly there was, well, I'm going to say some buff mixed in here because of these little speckles. That buff speckle from Pottery Supply House is in here, and who knows what else. Anyway, it has gone more peachy. So this again is a very peach tone in person. Oh, this one I did off screen. Yeah, this one I did off screen, and this was a pour. So I needed like another thing to fill up the kiln. So I poured Stardust in this and poured it out, and it's too thick. Starting to see some little pinholes happening here, and it's not as glossy of a surface. And then we have this little spiral bowl on the nuCeramics Bayside Buff Clay. And I did 2 coats on this because I wanted to see the spirals. That has worked very nicely. And on this dish, it's a decidedly pink float that's happening here. It's almost like it's on the orangey side of pink. And it's very much not white. This is not an off-white. This is a pink sort of a glaze. Again, a slow cool. This is on Reclaim, but I would say heavily leaning towards porcelain. Super pink float here. Like there's not even really an orange tone to this. This is pink. This is a pink glaze. Again, slow cool. This one we did 2 coats inside and out. And I would say 2 coats is enough. Although we did 3 coats here, and I think 2 coats would have been a little patchy. Maybe 2 coats on white and 3 on red. The other thing that you can't see, in fact, I can barely see it unless I'm looking at it in bright light, is that this is crazed. Little teeny tiny cracks in this glaze. That means it's not a great fit for this clay body, which is okay because I'm not a big fan of the pink float. But it is a shame. Then we have our combinations. So I did this little succulent planter, which had, refer to the notes, this had 2 coats of Stardust and then 2 coats of frosted topaz on the outside. It has gone matte where the 2 glazes are together. Again, slow cool. Frosted topaz does have a tendency to crystallize and go matte in a slow cool, so that's not a surprise. I suspect this will look very, very different in a regular cool. Again, we're seeing those pinky, peachy tones coming through. I think this combo would be worth trying again in a regular cool scenario, just to see kind of what happens, because there's a lot of different colors happening here. This is crazed as well quite a bit, so I don't know if you're going to be able to see any of the crazing. You might just need to take my word for it. There's a lot happening in the surface of this glaze, so I don't dislike it. It just, with the crazing, it's not ideal. Okay, so this is really interesting. So I had, like I say, some olive oil out, and clearly it's gotten on everything, but interesting because it's settled into the crazing. So this one has crazed as well. You can't really see it because of the colors of the glaze, but the olive oil kind of had settled into those cracks. This is, again, Reclaim, mostly porcelain, and it is 3 coats of seaweed on the outside, and then 2 coats of seaweed on the inside and 2 coats of Stardust. It's really pretty. In fact, it's so pretty I did another pot in this combo, which I will show you in a second. It's a very soft green color in person. And the last one that we did on screen was Stardust and Bougainvillea. I poured the inside with Stardust and then put 2 coats of Bougainvillea on it, and the outside was 2 coats of Stardust. It has gone very, very pink in all of the float. This, you can clearly see I didn't get as much on this spot when I was glazing it. The inside, not spectacular. The pour was too much glaze. There's a distinct orange peel texture here with some pinholes around the outside. I can see that this is crazed as well. So this Stardust really doesn't like my clay. It would be difficult to tell, except that you can see on the edges where it's thin. You can see through and see the crackle. Your mileage may vary. Test it out on your clays. So off screen, I did 2 more tests. I did not write down how many coats I did. I think it was 3. I'm gonna have to zoom you out a little bit. This is a big fella. This is a plant pot made in Pottery Supply House 500 red clay. And this was fired in a regular cool, not a slow cool. So let's show you the difference there. So the slow cool has gone a little bit more matte and a lot more peach. The regular cool, very glossy. The peach comes through down at the end, and it did run a little bit. So 3 coats was too much. 2 coats on the bottom and then a 3rd just at the top might have been a better choice. Anyway, this is a planter. It's just for me. I'll sand that down. It's not a big deal. I don't know if it's crazed. I don't see any signs of crazing, but it would be more difficult to tell on this dark clay. I like the way this looks better in a normal cool, but I mean, that's an aesthetic choice, not a functional one. Anyway, I'm pleased with how this turned out. This was the other piece that I did. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more even. There, so you can see all the other stuff that's going on my table. Sorry. So this one, I believe, I didn't write it down again, but I think it was 2 coats. In fact, I'm quite certain it was 2 coats of Stardust inside and out, and then 3 coats of seaweed down to about here. The 2 coats of Stardust has kind of gone, like there's a texture here that I don't really care for. So I don't know if maybe it just wasn't quite enough, but also this was raw glazed. And sometimes raw glazing does some interesting things. This obviously is a vase, so, you know, people aren't going to be like holding it. It's not like a mug, so not the end of the world. It's beautiful. Very pleased with how this turned out. Like I say, I glazed it down to about here, so like the top 1/3. So it did run, but did not run off the pot. And on the inside, it has behaved well. Now, is there crazing? I can't see any crazing, but based on kind of what I've seen on all the other pots, I'm going to guess that it might be there. This is only 2 coats, and it was raw glazed again. And usually I find, because I lack patience and I don't let it dry completely in between coats, it takes forever on greenware. So this probably is more like 1.5 coats or 2 very, very thin coats on a regular bisqued pot. So maybe the thinness of it has just kept it from crazing. That's a possibility as well. Okay, so there you have it, everybody. The results of the Stardust tests. An interesting glaze. I think if it fits your clay well, it could be a lot of fun to play with. I quite like it on the red clay in a regular cool because it's a much whiter result, which is kind of what I was after. But, you know, your mileage may vary. Keep an eye on it for crazing. That's going to depend just on your clay body and its expansion rate. So that's going to be different for everybody. So test it and look really closely at the results to see if you have crazing. I'm curious to know which of these results you prefer. Do you like the slow cool version or the regular cool version better? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, happy potting.